Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me call to order this meeting of the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. The time is 4 p.m. and the date is September 5th, 2023. Mr. Rugg, are there any additions, deletions, reorganization of the agenda?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Comments from the public. We do have a card from Ron Davis. Mr. Davis.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the board. I'm Ron Davis, West Palm Beach. Just wanted to comment briefly how pleased I was at the last CRA meeting to hear the progress that's been made on the strategic plan, finance plan that includes the resources that have been channeled into the areas of need are increasing significantly. As you know, I've been before this body for several years advocating for such increases, especially in Northwest, but I see that it's happening, and I am extremely pleased at the work that's being done, will be done in our community, and as always, I just wanted to say to you, thank you, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. There are no other cards, so we'll turn to the board for comment. Madam President, do you have any comments?
No, sir. No comments.
Commissioner Ward?
No, Mayor.
Commissioner Baduzzi?
No comments.
And Commissioner Fox?
No comments, thank you.
All right, very good. We do have a single item on the consent calendar, item 6.1. Are there any comments on consent? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move we accept consent as submitted.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.1, resolution number 23-21, adopting amendment number 19 to the Northwood Pleasant City CRA Strategic Finance Plan. Ms. Rook, you want to tee it up?
Thank you, Mayor. Board members, but before I turn it or ask Disa Campbell, the CRA's fiscal manager, just a couple of notes. First, this item or the presentation that fiscal manager Disa Campbell is about to present pertains to 7.1 and 7.2. And one point to note in here, and Disa will go through the items in it, we did have a budget change that resulted in additional funding being allocated to the Broadway private security contract, and I had mentioned that was the item that I had mentioned during agenda review. So we did make some changes. As we get closer to renewing the contract for private security, we reached out to them just to ensure that we had accurate numbers for budgeting purposes. And so when we got those numbers back, we'd made the adjustments accordingly. So that was the change to this item from last month's work item on the budget to today. So that is really the only change. Disa will go into that more, but Mayor, if there aren't any further questions, I'd like to turn it over to Disa Campbell.
Very good. Any questions of Mr. Rook before we do the presentation? Okay. Ms. Campbell?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. We'll begin tonight with the resolutions for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA, Resolution 2321 for the adoption of the 2024 to 2028 5-year strategic plan, and for Resolution 2322, which is the adoption of the 2024 budget for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. As usual, just so everybody remembers what our boundaries look like for the Northwood CRA. So we'll start with the strategic plan. And how we build a strategic plan, we look at where we are last year, what we know, what we project our revenues and expenses to be for the current year, and we build from the current year and project out for the 5 years ensuing. I have to reiterate again that the strategic plan is a very nimble and loose document. We project out the revenues, and then we allocate based on known projects to date, and then where we think we may spend money in the future. You look at these and you'll see very healthy reserves at the bottom at the end of each fiscal year. As we get closer to those each of those fiscal years, and new projects come up, and we know what the needs are in the community, those reserves will look more, for the current year, look more like the reserves for 2024, because we'll have the money better allocated to what we expect for the year. So over the next 5 years, we anticipate revenues of $46.7 million in the Northwood Pleasant City CRA. And you'll see we'll allocate those to various expenses, mostly to CRA initiatives. We'll service our debt and just continue to meet the goals of the CRA in the area. So how we delve into that now, we look more closely to the upcoming fiscal year budget, where we expect total revenue of $9.4 million. That's comprised of our carry forwards from the current year, money either allocated and or encumbered but not yet spent. We anticipate new revenues of $6.1 million, lease revenue and investment earnings that will give us our total, and then how we would use those. We show that 71% of the available funding goes into achieving the CRA initiative goals in the district, and that 71% combines the project funding and the innovative policing. Again, $1.8 million allocated for debt service, operating expenses of the CRA, and $412,000 in reserves for anything that may come up during the fiscal year. So how do we allocate those funds? The Northwood Business District will get $2.5 million. The big number here is the redevelopment incentives, $1 million for the anchor site, $500,000 for the spruce, and then the remainder will be for other redevelopment initiatives in the business community there. Private security services, Chris touched lightly on the changes that we had to the private securities contract. So this is where we see one of the first effects of that change. When we came to you last month, we had $530,000 approximately allocated for private security services. The new quote from PSC provided for a living wage for their workers, and that increased the rate. So here we don't have any increases in the shifts, but we had a just about a $29,000 increase in based on a rate increase. $31,000, I'm sorry, based on a rate increase. Community engagement and neighborhood stabilization, which includes any cleanups, landscaping maintenance, illegal dumping, repairs and maintenance in the community. Curry Corridor, all things Curry Park. The first two items are just a continuation of the ongoing initiatives for the redevelopment of the park, and we've introduced a new item for the redesign and improvement of the Joel Daves Park. Pleasant City, this year we've listened a lot, heard a lot from the residents in Pleasant City, so we've done a lot to try to respond to the needs of that community. So we've increased funding for lighting and landscaping, redevelopment initiatives. They have requested for us to look into private security services. We have a line item allocated there, but that is not yet defined. We don't know exactly what that contract will look like, so we'll definitely come back to you before we move forward with that. Just other initiatives, maintenance of Lot 23, a streetscape consultation, and again, community engagement in the area. Along the Broadway corridor, this is where we have the significant change from our last presentation, and that's in the private security services line. When we first came to you in August, we had an allocation of $160,000 for private security services. I'm sorry, $190,000. And the increase here to $308,000 includes the rate increase that we talked about, but it also includes a second shift. So they basically double the time and increase the rate. So that's why you see that large increase from our previous presentation. This is where we had to move quite a bit of money around. We took away funding for a Blum Park study. We decreased marketing and community allocations for marketing and community events along the Broadway corridor. We took away some of the marketing and community engagement allocations in the Northwood Business District, and a small amount of the redevelopment initiatives in the industrial area. So that ended up with a $118,000 increase here. Oh, and I should note that it also decreased. Our previous presentation showed reserves of $470,000 or thereabout. So now we also took $59,000 from that reserve allocation to provide for the additional services in Broadway. In the industrial park, again, we are focused more on learning what is, who the businesses are and how we could better serve them in years beyond fiscal year 2024. And then finally, other target initiatives, and these would be things that would cover the entire CRA, boundary to boundary, neighborhood stabilization that involves, again, community cleanups, regular landscaping of the district, property acquisition services, any studies that we would need to do. That's included in the 290. Holiday lighting, we have an allocation for the seawall plan, CRA property insurance, and finally the mayor's elementary education grant. So that leaves a total of $458,000 allocated for other target areas, initiatives throughout the community. So we've had extensive engagement on the budget build-up for this year. We did speak to representatives of the community, the CRA board in particular. We provided a preliminary budget discussion in July, and then we provided the strategic plan and the final budget presentation in August. The CRA was happy. They recommend approval of the budget, and so does the staff. So that will bring us to the end of the presentation for the Northwood Pleasant City CRA, and we can entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions? President Warren.
When do we anticipate the security going into effect for Pleasant City?
Judging by the process that we used last year and working with PSC, we could, I think it's a rough estimate to have them start around the spring once we get into outreach with the neighborhoods to get some input from them. Then also comparing that with generally some police data, and then coming up with a plan along with speaking with PSC, then presenting that back to the neighborhood, and then getting all the contract, the work authorization. So we did it last year for Broadway, and that took us, Commissioner Ward, right around April by the time we got it in place.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
Mayor.
would say it's 6 months after. And Pleasant City, they were actually, sorry, I just jumped in on the conversation, Mayor, I apologize. Pleasant City was very adamant about trying to get the whole Pleasant City area, and obviously that's a bigger hurdle, and so we wanted to kind of get with them on, okay, targeting, just like we did with Broadway with the police. So I'd say that's a good estimate, spring.
Thank
Any
you.
follow-up? Okay. Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. I am very happy to see this additional security for, it looked like Pleasant City, Broadway, and Northwood all had their own security services. I just wanted to ask a little bit about how it was decided to move forward with that security. I'm very happy to see it, but I know that also in some of the neighborhoods in my district that we've been asking for additional security, and I would like to see that included in, the historic Northwest, perhaps going forward as well. I'm just wondering if there were some kind of parameters that that you were looking for in order to decide how to move forward with that. Thanks.
So the genesis of the security discussion started back at the beginning of this year when there was sort of a gathering at one of the local churches. Oh gosh, the church is going to escape me now, but it's on Spruce, Antioch Baptist, and at that meeting, really there was a lot of dialogue between the residents in the neighborhood and several opinion leaders. And that discussion kind of grew, and we had a couple more outreach meetings with the Pleasant City community, who sort of gave us a list of wishes that they would like to see addressed. And as part of the group of folks that were meeting with them regularly, private security was born out of that wish list. So as the conversations went on, we included it in this year's budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-21.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.2, resolution number 22F, adopting the final estimates of revenue and expenditures for the fiscal year commencing on October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024 for the Northwood Pleasant City District of the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. Ms. Rue?
Mayor, this item is related to DC Campbell's presentation for adopting the budget for this year in the Northwood Pleasant City CRA.
All right, so this then relates to the previous presentation.
Yes, sir.
Right, so any questions, comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-22F.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now on to item 7.3, resolution number 23-23, adopting amendment number 18 to the Downtown City Center CRA Strategic Finance Plan. Ms. Campbell?
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 2323, the adoption of the fiscal year 2024 to 2028 strategic plan, and 2023-2024F, 23-24F for the adoption of the fiscal year budget for the Downtown CRA City Center for 2024. That'll just give us a refresher on what our target areas are for the district. Again, we'll start with the strategic plan, for which builds from the current year's budget. For this year's budget, we are working with a total of approximately $90 million in the downtown city center CRA. And when we extrapolate that and what we anticipate our revenue stream to be over the next 5 years, again, we're looking at revenues of $375.7 million into the downtown city center CRA over the next 5 years. Again, that money will be allocated consistent with the goals as outlined in the CRA plan, which would include the innovative policing, all the different target area initiatives. It will allow for us to service our debt and to allow for the ongoing operations of the CRA. Again, we do show very hefty reserves as we get further out, but as we get closer to those years, those reserves that you see there, $34 million, that will dwindle right down to $4 million as we allocate that money to whatever initiatives we have at the time. To focus on the fiscal year 2024 budget highlights, I apologize for that. So we start with carry forward money, $17.4 million from the operating fund 105 and $13.3 million from the bond fund. As we go through the presentation, you will note areas where you will see the 2 asterisks. Those line items indicate that inclusive in the funding is money from that's being brought forward from the bond fund. That is very quickly dwindling. We would note that you didn't see any bond funds for the NPC, the Northwood Pleasant City CRA, that those monies are spent. And this is, fund is the bond fund for the downtown area is quickly dwindling as well. For the current fiscal year, we have $58 million approximately in new revenue, 35 million from the city, 20 from the county, and $3.2 million from the DDA area. We anticipate investment earnings of approximately $800,000 between what's left in the bond fund and what is in the operating fund, and then lease payments for CRA properties and the sale of the Sticks Ventures. So we have, that anticipates the remaining 2 buildings in the Sticks development. Of that, our revenue, 53.8 million goes directly into project funding, $11 million for our debt service. We match the DDA and give them back $6.6 million to carry out their initiatives in the downtown area. Existing TIF agreements, that's mostly with the CDD area at the moment, $5.6 million. Reserves of 4.9, CRA operating expenses of 3.9, and we've allocated approximately $3.7 million, $3.8 million to the police department for innovative policing. And how does that look? We take this, again, we take the 60% for project funding, the 4% for innovative policing, the TIF allocation in the DDA, and that comprises the areas, the initiatives that would fulfill the CRA goals for the district. And how do we allocate that? 49% goes to the Historic Northwest. We have 9% in the downtown core. 11% goes to the DDA. Other target areas, 13%. 2% to the Okeechobee corridor. 6% in Clear Lake, and 10% in the Brownsford Nora Providencia Park District. So we turn our focus now to the historic Northwest target area. Listed there, you will see all of our brick and mortar projects where we anticipate a spend of $13 million for the year. We've allocated $5.7 million for streetscape improvements on the continuation of the improvements on the Rosemary streetscape from the city center, the square, all the way out to 10th Street. And then the asterisks, again, those are remaining funds in the bond fund for the current unallocated, unencumbered funds for the Tamarind Avenue Street project. We've had a lot of discussion about the CAT. That $5.5 million, again, is already allocated in the bond fund. We will not do anything with that again before coming back to the board to present a proposal on how we might spend that money. In the Historic Northwest, we've allocated $1.3 million to our marketing, activation, and community engagement initiatives, and that is mostly comprised of the major events that we do: Barbecue Brews and Brews, Winter in Paradise. It allows for the openings of our major projects in the area, and it also includes activation for the Heart and Soul Park. Neighborhood stabilization, that includes our security for the Sunset Lounge, Heart and Soul Park, Sticks vicinity, security cameras for Sunset Lounge, landscaping, a density study, ongoing operations for and maintenance for the Sunset Lounge until those costs are turned over to an operator. The continuation of a lighting project in the neighborhood along Douglas Avenue, and cultural preservation of the community. Business incentives, we have a small allocation, if needed, for the CRA's contribution to the ongoing operations of the Sunset Lounge once we identify an operator. We have allocations there for our ongoing grants in the neighborhood, the paint, plan, and pave grants, the facade improvement, the business development grants. And then that also includes $80,000 match for a Building Bridges branch, the Building Bridges grant match. And then finally, $1 million for our continuing efforts for property acquisition in the area. Next, we move to Nora and Brownsford Park, Providencia Park. The $5 million that you see there is the first tranche of our input to the developer for the improvements of the streetscape. We've allocated $1 million for new businesses, new business attraction. Once that area picks up, that'll help with tenant improvements or just general business relocations, and then a traffic analysis in that district. In the downtown core, there's not much change here in the nature of the projects that we support, initiatives that we are targeting in the downtown core. Waterfront programming and improvements that includes an allocation for a park and $1.1 million for the ongoing operations of the waterfront. We call it trolley operations, but we now know we've moved away from the trolleys, but until the pilot for the next year, the CRA will fund $1.2 million to that initiative. redevelopment incentives that includes ongoing commitments for workforce development to several businesses that we have already entered into contracts with. The 314 Clematis, we haven't added any new funding to that line item. We are still hopeful that in the current fiscal year we may be able to dispose of that property, but if not, then that money will be used to carry out some improvements, very much needed improvements. $500,000 for the improvements, upgrades to the Clematis streetscape, replacing bollards, cleaning up the, replacing pavers that are needed, and just a general improvement to what is there, repairs to the streetscape now. Consultants, $270,000, and then public art support for a piece that will go along the waterfront. That'll be a part of the waterfront, new park at the waterfront. In the Clear Lake District, the focus here is on the FEC crossing, or the proposed FEC crossing. We've allocated $3 million for property acquisitions that would accommodate that. Again, the $500,000 is a carry forward from the bond fund, and that is money left over for, I think the last piece for that is the intersection of Tamarind and Banyan. I think that'll be completed sometime this year. And then the $300,000 is for continuing design and consultation on what the Fern Street crossing should look like. The Okeechobee corridor, we've allocated $800,000 to work with the Department of Transit for the redesign of the Okeechobee corridor coming into the city, and then $300,000 that may go towards the designs, additional services related to that project. District-wide initiatives, again, we have carry forward money from the bond fund, which is supposed to fund the phase 2, or to begin phase 2 of the Banyan streetscape, and that will take us from Quadrille out to Flagler. Neighborhood stabilization, that includes district-wide landscaping maintenance, any property acquisition services that we may need, and just general consulting, things that may come up along the way that we don't necessarily anticipate. New projects that we need to have some studies or whatever, that's included in that funding. $450,000, $200,000 of which goes to the police for innovative policing technology, and $250,000 to public works. CRA insurances, that covers all of the property insurance for the CRA in the downtown district. Most of that is related to the Sunset Lounge. And then we have the $80,000 allocation for the seawall plan, and finally the mayor's education grant. As I mentioned earlier, we've allocated $6.6 million back, matching the tip from the CRA, the DDA, and that will go back to the DDA to fulfill the initiatives in the downtown core. And that would summarize the presentation. Staff recommends approval of resolutions 22, 23, 2323 and 2324F.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Any questions or comments, board members? President Warren?
Thank you for another great presentation and how consistent you are and how clear and easy it was to follow. I'm sure that you've mentioned this before, but can you remind me, what are the initiatives that we're planning for the streetscapes? I know that we mentioned Banyan and Rosemary. What are some of the things that we're taking on there?
So we've allocated funding for the larger allocation this year is for the Rosemary Streetscape, and that is to continue a similar design from City Place through the historic Northwest and along past the Sunset Lounge. The Banyan Streetscape, again, a lot of that is carry forward money from the bond fund that was supposed to, so we finished phase 1 of Banyan. Now we have to focus on phase 2 from Quadrille out to Flagler. So there was $4.5 million remaining in the bond fund. We've augmented that this year with $2 million, and we still have to go to bid for that. We're not sure what that's going to cost. It's probably unlikely that it will be completed in this fiscal year. So next fiscal year, we may see additional monies being allocated to the Banyan Streetscape. But other than that, there was a small amount of $500,000 left over for the intersection at Tamron and Tamron and Banyan, I'm sorry, Tamron and Banyan.
Follow up?
No, just a housekeeping. It just helped me to follow along when the pages are numbered. So if you guys can just kind of,
Okay.
that helps me. Thank you.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. I have a few questions, but my first question, I noticed on the tent site lease in the finance plan, it looked like it wasn't going to start until 2027. We haven't talked about the tent site in a while, but I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about, is that the date they're anticipating to be moving into the building and complete, or how does our lease work with them about when they're going to start paying on it?
So they have a development agreement, Commissioner, and I can share that with you if you'd like to see it. And yes, the intention is that once they have CO on the building, that the lease payments start. And I believe that's a rate of about $1 million a year to the CRA. But as a quick update to the tent site, they are expecting, they're in for building permit now, and they are anticipating a groundbreaking first quarter of next year. So it's actually still moving forward, and they're growing increasingly excited about starting the project.
You had another question?
Thank you. You mentioned about the Heart and Soul, the security cameras in there, and I know that it's something we've been waiting for at least a year. I don't know if there's any updates from the police department. I know that there was some issue with the technology we were waiting for. Thanks.
Yes. So on the cameras, it's a bit of a technical issue. And just bear with me a moment. We actually need to install a pole in Heart and Soul Park, and that is to create an appropriate line of sight for the radio signal to go from the camera to the receiving area for that information, and to also have the appropriate location to where we have a full view of the park. So because of those technical needs, it has delayed it a little bit, but we're working with PD on the location of the pole, as well as getting that camera up as soon as we can.
And if I may just clarify, the allocation for security cameras this year is actually for the Sunset Lounge. So some of them will be on the exterior, and hopefully we'll be able to get some of the park in that as well. But the allocation this year is primarily for the interior and exterior of the Sunset Lounge itself.
You got another question?
I wanted to ask about the Fern Street crossing that we have allocated $300,000. I know that later today on our city commission agenda, we have an item regarding the Fern Street crossing, so it looks like it is moving forward. But what is the $300,000 for? I anticipate that the cost of the crossing will be much more than that. So if you can just describe a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. So the Fern Street crossing is we're taking a lot of guidance from our engineering department. The 300,000, I believe, was the request from engineering to help initiate the design. So just general needs that we're going to need in order to kickstart the project from a design standpoint. So that number was built in from the guidance from our engineering department in order to keep the project moving forward.
And when it moves forward, is that a CRA expense or a city expense?
I think that's to be determined, but if I had to anticipate, there's probably lots of funding sources. The CRA may be one of them, but I think as that project sort of matures and we start getting allocations, there may be grant dollars available for that, and other infrastructure funding sources, whether it's state, national, or local, that we can start tapping into. I don't believe that the CRA would need to bear the brunt of the entire cost of the project, but I see us playing definitely a role in making it a reality.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2323.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. In 7.4, resolution number 23-24F, adopting the final estimates of revenue and expenditures for the fiscal year commencing on October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024, for the Downtown City Center District of the West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency. And this was the presentation that we just heard.
Yes, Mayor.
So are there any questions on this particular resolution? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 23-24F.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And that is the last item on this agenda, and so the CRA meeting is adjourned. Thank you.